Okay. Good morning. Welcome to Abundant Life Homestead. For 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, we come together for a Bible study and chat. And during this time, we can talk about whatever we want, but the intention is to dig into God's Word. And we like to dive into it kind of a different way. We're loosely structured. We don't have a study guide. We do follow the Revised Common Lectionary as far as what scriptures to get into. But when we get into the scriptures, we kind of like to dive into them like your kids at the hotel swimming pool. We don't really test the water first. We don't try to figure out what we know about it first. We jump into it. And then we talk about amongst each other, just like the kids do. We talk amongst each other about what happened when we hit that water, when we jumped into that word. And in that way we share real, open and candid experiences. When you dive into God's Word, you experience His Word. Whether it enlightens you to something that's happened in your past, or something that's going on right now in your life, or something that you see coming down the road, no matter where you get to in the Bible. And not so much when you just take one verse. We don't like to proof text and just take one verse here and there. We take passages, entire passages, sometimes in entire chapters. When you take that passage, you will almost always be able to connect it with your life in some way. But not always. Just almost always. Sometimes you're going to read a passage, you're going to struggle through it. But someone else isn't. Someone else is going to look at that passage and say, man, this really hits me. This is what I've been going through. So we encourage each other to share those experiences, so that when one of us struggles, one of us finds ourselves struggling in the Word, another may be able to completely open the door and enlighten the one that's struggling, because that person has experienced this Word in an entirely different way. The Word is a lamp unto our feet and light unto our path. It's a lamp unto my feet, my path, a lamp unto your feet, your path. And each and every one of us are on a different path. But the same God comes to us on that path. Our feet and our path are right here and right now. God comes to each and every one of us right here, right now, right where we are. So even though your path is different, your path still receives the same light. My path receives the same light. And there are times when my path can help you understand your path, and there's times when your path can help me understand my path. And the culmination of it all, the hope of it all, is that when this Word shines a lamp into our feet and a light into our path, when that light shines before us, no matter what else we see, no matter what situation we have, when the light shines before us, when God comes to us and opens up that path in front of us, what we see, what we recognize, what we know is Jesus. So I invite you to join me 4 days a week, each morning. For me, it's one of the first things I do in the morning. I get up a little earlier than when I start, but you can tell I throw some clothes on. My hair's still a little messy. I've only been up a little bit. I like to do it first thing in the morning, but I know my timing isn't first thing in the morning for everyone, and that's all right. Especially some of our regulars. When Salvador joins us, he comes from Germany, and when Michael Davis joins us, he comes from Australia. Very different time zones, but for me, it's first thing in the morning, and I invite you to join me, share these experiences, share in the fellowship, and I just had a mind blank. So, good morning, Richie. Glad to have you with us as always, brother. And Miss Bliss, good to have you with us. Always a blessing to have you with us. You say, I miss this when I can't make it. Well, we miss you when you can't make it. I often, I talk about it often, but I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. When I say things like mention each other in your prayers, I often mention each and every one of you, and I've got a list written down in my notebook of those who come often, especially. And when someone drops off, when someone doesn't make it for a day, I kind of start to wonder and worry, when I mention someone's name and realize, well, they weren't here today, and then they weren't here tomorrow, and they weren't here last week. We miss you just as much when you can't make it. And we do have some who were regulars that we seem to have entirely lost. If you've been around for a while, Coffee House State of Mind. The last communication I got from her, she was having some physical problems. She was having some relationship problems. Said she wasn't going to be around for a while, and then her YouTube channel disappeared. Her channel had been deleted, and haven't heard anything since. So, but we do still continue to keep her on our list of prayers. So yes, we do enjoy having you with us, and we do miss you, and we do notice when you are not here. So today is Thursday, October the 23rd. Man, 2025 is getting real close to coming to a close. And it's also, at least for us, and Miss Bliss, I don't remember if I've asked before. I don't remember offhand where you're from, what area. But at least for us here, we very suddenly went from summer-like weather to late fall, almost winter-like weather. And there was thick frost on everything today. There was a cold wind blowing all day yesterday. It never got out of the 40s. So this sudden weather change is kind of hitting us, but letting us know that it's fall and that this year is coming close to an end. The wind died down today, though. Yesterday it was. I didn't spend much time outside yesterday, and I really needed to. I'm going to have some stuff to catch up on today. Today being Thursday, it's the last day of the week for us here in the study, and once I get Grandma taken care of, once I get probably after lunch, once she's able to have someone else with her, and it can free me up a little bit, I am going to spend the entire afternoon working on that trailer again. Nothing broke on it this time, but I'm going to build some rails on it, make it more like a hay rack. We're going to use it for a hay ride for the church this weekend for the kids. We're having a fall fun party, and the people who are organizing, they said it would be fine to just put the bales of straw in my landscape trailer, but I got to thinking, for one, if we have 30-inch rails all around that trailer, it could help us avoid some lawsuits, and not just lawsuits, but injuries. Whether it culminated in a lawsuit or not, we don't want injuries. So I'm going to build some 30-inch high rails all the way around that trailer, but also it kind of adds to it'll kind of add to the hayride experience for the kids. They're sitting on bales of hay on a trailer, or sitting on bales of hay in a trailer that's built like a hay rack. So today and probably tomorrow morning, I'm going to be spending a lot of time cutting, drilling, driving screws. I'm going to turn my trailer into something for the kids this weekend. Even though it's going to take me about a day and a half to build, and the entire event only lasts about 2.5 hours. I think it's entirely worth it. It's entirely worth it when it's for the kids. You know, something we talked about in last night's class. We go through this class on Wednesday evenings, and right now it's If Jesus Was a Parent. It's a book that we go through, and it's I can't remember the name of the author, but what we studied last night was really about fully committing yourselves to God, what it means to fully commit, and passing that commitment on to your children in a way that they will hold on to into their own adulthood. And we spent a lot of time talking about the heart, and Pastor Neil asked all of us, you know, is there anything God is working on in your heart? And for me, yes, something he's currently been working on, and for some time, is that love is not a burden. Love is always sacrifice, but love is not a burden. I was starting to, you know, and this is kind of a confession, I guess. I was starting to get into this point where I had there were things that needed to be done. Things that needed to be done for the church, for the kids, for God. Some things God was moving me to do, and I would do them. But there were other things that I ended up taking on because there was no one else. And this extends beyond church things, but also home things and relationship things and family things. But I think the church thing is the best example of it. There were things I ended up taking on as well because there was no one else. And I started to, I guess, have some animosity about the things that God wasn't exactly calling me to do, but I ended up having to do. And he's really kind of worked with me and changed that lately. Like whether he calls me to do it or not, whether he's actively pushing me to take on this job, it's still work for him. It is still love. It is still sacrifice. And if I'm doing that work for him, it is not a burden. So why are the negative feelings coming in? So even whether he's pushing me, whether he's telling me give or do, or whether someone else is coming in and saying, hey, we need this. There's no one else could do. We need you to do this. It's all, to me. It's all been all about taking it by the horns and loving that work. Loving the fact that I'm giving that up. So push. It's been a struggle. It's been a struggle with me, but I'm getting to the point. He's really been working on me. He's been putting several situations in front of me. I'm getting to the point that yes, I fully enjoy it. I'm not going to go at it with the bare minimum just because I didn't want to do it. I'm going to go at it with full force. And that's kind of what's bringing out this work that I'm getting ready to do today, building in this thing into the hay rack. I was just going to do the minimum. I was just going to take the trailer, put the kids on it, take a tractor. I didn't want to pull them with a truck. We're going to pull them around the property with a tractor. But I was just going to put the minimum into it just to make sure it gets done. And then he really, really weighed on me last night, and it's like I need to put everything I got into this, and I'm going to. So that probably has nothing to do with the psalm we're getting ready to read this morning, but that's something that's really come at me, really hit me, something really weighed on me lately, you know. Good morning, Bradley. Bradley says, that's how I became the leader of security, working in the cafe, etc. The power of why is great, but so is the power of no. You know, Bradley, and I don't know where you're at with things like this, the security in the cafe and this. And I don't know, I don't know what kind of feelings you've had or haven't had about that, but if God weighs on you in the same way, the love is always a sacrifice, but it's never a burden. It should be joyful sacrifice, giving of yourself, giving for Him, and it's a hard lesson to learn as humans, I think, because as humans, that's not our natural reaction. It's not our natural state. And good morning, Melinda. I didn't know if you'd be able to join us this morning. Bradley saying you've resigned from those positions. That's cool too, because, you took it up at a time, I don't know all the details, but you took it up at a time when there was no one else. If you've given it up now, then there is someone else taking that position. And, everything we do has a season, and even if our season is just to plow the field and not even really plant the seeds, when our job is done, someone else can come in and do the next part. Sometimes it's our job to plant the seeds and someone else's job to nourish the plants. Sometimes it's our job to take care of it all the way up to the end, but then someone else's job to harvest. So it wasn't for you to continue. You had your season in it. When you were needed, you were there. And now that someone else can take those reins, you can go plow a different field. And I think you with you and Katie being called into ministry, you're getting ready to plow a different field. And that may be the field you stick with, or maybe you're going to go off and plow another field and blaze another trail, and then maybe there will be a time where you stop and you now here is where you plant the seeds, you nourish the plants, or here is where you go collect the harvest. We have a season for everything we do, and it's all in God's plan, God's lineup. But hey, this morning being a Thursday, we read a psalm. Generally, we call it wisdom passage Thursday, and it's mostly a psalm, but not always. I'm thinking about actually changing that to, instead of wisdom Thursdays, poetic Thursdays. But the two go hand in hand. I mean, the more poetic areas, the more poetic books and verses in the Bible also are full of a lot of wisdom. Melinda says it's a great learning point. Once you experience this feeling, you know how to say no in the future and are more likely to do so. I know from experience that's something that, whether it's internal or whether it's God, has been working on Melinda. Melinda had a hard time saying no to anything for a long time. I know I'm talking about getting kind of pushed into these positions. These are things that I could easily say no to, but just the way I'm built, the mind that God gave me, if I can do it, I almost never say no. If I can do it, I will do it. Especially when it comes to the children, when it comes to the elderly. I really I guess it really stuck with me, really grew in me, really ingrained in me. Christ's words and Peter's. I think it's also mentioned in Peter, the two biggest places, but really mentioned throughout the Bible. But the how does he put it now? Basically, the first judgment, the first test, the first muster you must pass is how you took care of the orphans and the widows, what you did for the ones who couldn't take care of themselves. And that has stuck with me most of my life, and it's probably a big part of why I'd done a lot taking care of widows. Grandma wasn't a widow when we moved here, and I started taking care of her, but since she's been a widow since 2016, and we had Aunt Frances with us for 8 years living here. And she had been a widow since 2006, I think. But taking care of the children and the elderly, those who can't do a lot to take care of themselves. If I'm called by man or God and I am capable whatsoever, I say yes. And a lot of times I can look back and say, I should have said no. I didn't really have the time and resources, but I did. I got it done, But I can say no, but in those situations I rarely do. But I know Melinda's been working on saying no more often, probably for the last couple of years. Sometimes we need to say no. Sometimes it's not for us. And sometimes it is just for a short season, like we talked with Bradley. It's 20 after 8. I got a full psalm to read, and we haven't even got there yet. But that's all right. That is all right. But today we're reading Psalm 65. And the Amplified titles this, God's Abundant Favor to Earth and Man. This is a psalm written by David, and many believe it is a psalm written for a time of harvest, for a festival or a time of sacrifice when you've harvested your crops, your grain, your grapes, and your giving of the first fruits to God. Because it has several references to the grain and the crops and the water and whatnot. We don't know that for certain. David didn't write out a excerpt on every psalm saying this is why I wrote this. It just kind of believed that's what it is, and that makes it perfect timing for us here. They're all around us. There's combines running 24/7. And most of it is harvesting grain. So, it would have been, for us, it would have been this time of year. Although for Michael, and Michael's not with us, by the way, today. He sent me a message. But for Michael down in Australia, I think I don't know what their growing season is, but if he'd basically be getting close to the end of what would be April as far as the season goes here for us in Indiana. So Michael, the southern half of the world, they're probably just getting into planting season right now. But here and now in Indiana and much of the Midwest and other places. We are in harvest season. This is to the chief musician, a psalm of David, a song. To you belongs silence, the submissive wonder of reverence, and it bursts into praise in Zion, O God. And to you the vow shall be performed. O you who hear prayer, to you all mankind comes. Wickedness and guilt prevail against me, yet as for our transgressions you forgive them, removing them from your sight. Blessed is the one whom you choose and bring near to dwell in your courts. We will be filled with the goodness of your house, your holy temple. By awesome and wondrous things Verse 5. By awesome and wondrous things you answer us in righteousness, O God of our salvation. You who are the trust and hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest sea, who creates the mountains by his strength, being clothed with power, who stills the roaring of the seas, the roaring of the waves, and the tumult of the peoples. So they who dwell at the ends of the earth stand in awe of your signs, the evidence of your presence. You make the dawn and the sunset shout for joy. You visit the earth and make it overflow with water. You greatly enrich it. The stream of God is full of water. You provide the grain when you have prepared the earth. You water its furrows abundantly. You smooth its ridges. You soften it with showers. You bless its growth. You crown the year with your bounty, and your paths overflow. The pastures of the wilderness drip with dew, and the hills are encircled with joy. The meadows are clothed with flocks, and the valleys are covered with grain. They shout for joy, and they sing. Okay. So he starts this off. To you belongs the silence, the submissive wonder of reverence. And I'm going to look at that, and I don't know if I keep it up on this. I have an idea about this one. Okay, the King James Version says, Praise waiteth for thee, O God. What's New International say? Praise awaits you. Because it seems, and the Passion says, O God in Zion, to you even silence is praise. Okay. Because it seems a little odd to just throw that out there. To you belongs silence. Because we think of praise as screaming and shouting for joy and singing and making joyful noise and playing instruments and everything. And that is praise, that is glorifying God, but there's also another aspect of praise. To be in awe of his presence, for him to pour himself out upon you and for you to just sometimes just soak him in for a bit, but sometimes be so overwhelmed and wonder that you can't come to words, you can't utter anything. To have such wonder, to have, I can't find the words necessarily, but when he's there with you and you feel him, and to know that is the God of the universe, to feel it, to know it within your heart, and to be just in submissive wonder, as he says. I don't really think that's the words I was looking for, but to feel him and to know who he is, to know his person and his character to the point that you really can't shout for joy in those moments, to have that silence. That is also praise. When we complete praise to God includes the yelling and singing and joyful noise, but also includes the silence. To him belongs the silence. And I like how the Amplified puts it here. To you belongs the silence, and it bursts into praise. So it has both parts of that glorifying God, both parts of the praising God. We just often don't think about the silence as part of it. You know, in a lot of Psalms we get the word Selah, and they kind of give that a pause, pause to think about or pause to reflect. A lot of times I put it as shut up a minute and think about what you just read. Keep quiet a minute and really take in what just happened. We tend to leave out the silent part of praise when we think about praise, but complete praise includes both the silence and the shouting. To you belongs silence, the submissive wonder of reverence, and it bursts into praise on Zion, O God. And to you the vow shall be performed. And we don't necessarily know what David was talking about here with to you the vow should be performed. There's many times we can make a vow unto God. Many times that we can make a commitment or a promise to him. And sometimes it's personal, it's just us. Sometimes it's within our group, within our church, within the denomination, or within Christians as a whole. Or back then, with the Jews and their festivals and different times. But I kind of think specifically in this, if this is a psalm on the harvest season, this vow shall be performed. We promised you our first fruits when we planted the seeds. We're going to give you those first fruits when the harvest comes. But any vow, leaving this open to any vow, any promise, any commitment we make to God is just as important as that vow to give him the first fruits. It's a promise, a commitment we need to keep, we intend to keep. Now we know that humans tend to fail at that because, the first covenant, we could not, the humans would not and could not keep the covenant. Even in our best intentions, we can't always keep every covenant we make with him. But we need to deem them as important, take them with intention. The vow, and to you the vow shall be performed. When you plant the seeds and promise God the first fruits, you give him the first fruits. And Richie brings up the awestruck and overwhelming feeling that comes with the recognition of God in everything. Yeah, when we see him as the God of the universe, when we recognize that, I think the only reaction for anyone who recognizes For those who ignore and reject God, they probably, they will one day have that reaction when every knee will bow and every tongue confess. They'll have that submission, but at that time it will be forced. Those who reject God now in life probably wouldn't have that awestruck, overwhelming feeling. But when you know God, you know His person and character, when you feel His presence with you, that's should be the natural reaction. I kind of liken it to when someone meets their favorite star, be it a movie star or a sports player, and they meet them and get to shake their hand, get their autograph, whatever, and a lot of times you see them there and they freeze up, they clam up, they don't know what to say. They're so awestruck because they're in the presence of their favorite superstar. God would and should be our ultimate superstar. To be in His presence, to for our bodies, our minds to lock up like that. And that is not just a human response, but a correct response. It is part of complete praise, giving Him both the silence and the shouts of joy. O you who hear prayer, to all you, O you who hear prayer, to you all mankind comes. This is one of those areas it touches, and we'll see it again within this psalm. We often bring it up. The God, Lord God Almighty, the God of the universe, He was not just the God of the Jews. He had a plan for all the peoples of all the earth. At the time, mankind wasn't really ready for that. Mankind couldn't keep the old covenant. It wouldn't be until the new covenant that the Spirit really opened up to everyone. But the plan was always there. The plan was always in motion. David, knowing that the Jews are God's chosen people, the Jews are special to God, knew that God wasn't exclusive to the Jews. And we kind of talked about yesterday, what about, touched on a little bit, what about those who never hear God's word, who know nothing of the Bible, who have never had any teaching, but they feel there's something, there's a creator is weighing on their heart, and they call out to Him. He's not going to ignore him. He doesn't ignore you just because you're ignorant of Him. And I think even then, David would have been 2,800 years ago, somewhere around there. Those who had no knowledge, all mankind can and does pray to God, reaches out to Him, searches for Him, seeks Him, looks around their universe, sees knows that there is a creator, and they seek that creator to glorify Him. And then they begin learning from there. So even King David knew that God, the God that worked in his life, was not there just for him, was not there just for the Jews, was not there just for Jerusalem and Israel, but to all mankind. And he kind of speaks of it again later in this psalm. says, wickedness and guilt prevail against me. Yet as for our transgressions, you forgive them, removing them from your sight. David was bold enough to proclaim the God of the universe, bold enough to know that God was in everything, but humble enough to say, I messed up. Humble enough to recognize, even through our best intentions, sometimes we slip, sometimes we sin. And the ability to say, hey, I sinned. I did something terrible. Not trying to hide it from God, recognizing who God is and knowing you can't hide it from Him. Many of us still do try to hide sin. But to be bold enough to proclaim God, but humble enough to say, I messed up, and be repentant for that messing up. Wickedness and guilt prevail against me. Sometimes they win, sometimes they prevail. Yet as for our transgressions, you forgive them, removing them from your sight. Again, I think David kind of knows. David, not only being a king, not only being the little shepherd boy that took down Goliath, but being a prophet of God. David believes in the sacrificial system. David uses the sacrificial system. But he understands that the sacrifice is just covering sin. He looks forward to a future, to a time, to a promise God has made when you forgive those sins and remove them from your sight, to where they're gone, not just covered by blood, but completely, totally destroyed, gone, tossed as far as the east is to the west. Again, he fully knows the God of the universe. He doesn't fully know His plan. He doesn't know everything about God's plan. None of us ever do. If we did, we'd have no reason to be here on earth. We'd have no reason to learn anything. We would be in glory with Him, and we still wouldn't know the entirety of His plan. But David sees, he knows, he gives us snippets and an idea of the God he serves is the God we serve today. The Lord God Almighty, He's been the same yesterday, today, and forever. What has changed is mankind and our readiness to be able to handle His plan. But His plan has always been there, for all mankind to come to Him, for the true forgiveness of sins, the Jesus Christ making atonement for our sins, and not just the blood of our animals covering our sins, but true atonement, forgiveness, removing those sins. David knows and understands God is the same yesterday, today, forever. The God of David is the God of now. He's the God of Jonathan and Richie and Melinda and Bradley and Miss Bliss and anyone else. He didn't change. He's guided, leaded, directed mankind to change. And that's kind of changed man's perspective on Him. But God hasn't changed. His plan was always there, and His plan is forever being set in motion. Yeah, I like that, Richie. God chooses strange and interesting ways to mold us and guide us towards our purpose. Yeah. Yeah, he does. Blessed is the one whom you choose and bring near to dwell in your courts. We will be filled with the goodness of your house and your holy temple. Again, here is another. He's where David sees the future of this new covenant. David sees God's plan just by his very words here. Blessed is the one whom you choose and bring near, those that are called by God. Every one of us is called by God at some point. God weighs on our hearts. God draws us to Him. It's not just something that's for the high priests and the Sunday school teachers and the preachers who stand at the pulpit. They're called in a different way. They're called to equip, but everyone is called in some way. Everyone is drawn to God. And David understands that. It's not just, he speaks about the temple here, but he says to dwell in your courts. The innermost parts of the temple, especially the Holy of Holies, there was very few who were ever allowed to enter there. And each level of the temple, it got more exclusive and more exclusive. But in the courts is where everyone was allowed. You didn't have to prove your lineage to enter the courts of the temple. You didn't have to prove you were a Jew or pay your tax or this or that. At least the way I understand it, anyone and everyone was allowed in the courts of the temple. So again, showing, David understands, David knows God is not exclusive to who he calls. He's not exclusive to who can come into his courts. He's not exclusive to who can receive his blessing. Other than he calls you. He comes to you where you are and draws you into his courts where everyone is welcome. And then he starts to work with you. Then he starts to work on you. But the courts is where all are allowed. David sees this. Even though in his time, very few, it wasn't revealed, the veil wasn't torn. Very few saw that God was the God of everyone. Not just those of certain and prestigious bloodlines. Not just those of the Jews. Not just the God of the Jews. God's plan has always been laid out in His Word. I love that. I do. We will be filled with the goodness of your house and your holy temple. By awesome and wondrous things you answer us in righteousness, O God of our salvation. You who are the trust and hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest sea. Again, all the earth, the ends of the earth. And when I think of the ends of the earth, I think of two completely different aspects. So first, the ends of the earth, literally the physical earth, reaching out to all mankind. That's one way to look at the ends of the earth, even those in countries and those civilizations that may have been cut off and unknown at the time. Where were we? you who are the trust and hope of all the ends of the earth and the farthest sea. So literally, physically, the ends of the earth, all around the globe. But I also see, when I hear the ends of the earth, I also think about the forgotten, the downtrodden, the ones who are left behind by society, the ones who are oppressed by society, the ones who are so broken they seem impossible to reach, the ones who are hiding, those that we don't see every day, whether physically not see, as in they're not around, or that we don't see what they're going through because they're hiding it on the inside. The hardest to reach, the ones we can't reach, the farthest ends of the earth can sometimes be right in your own hometown, right in your own church or your own house. But He is the trust and hope of all the ends of the earth, even those we can't reach. At least He can be when they call out to Him. And we talked extensively about that yesterday. But we have to stay open to Him. We have to keep this line of communication open with Him, because sometimes that the ends of the earth that we find right there in our own community or own church, when they're searching for hope, they're searching for trust, they're calling out to God, sometimes He sends us to be that hope for them. And when He comes to us for that, if we don't, going back to the beginning of this psalm, when He comes to tell us that, when He comes to move on you, if you don't have those moments of silent praise, if you keep all the chaos going on, you can completely miss when He says go, when He says give, when He says lift this person up or jump down in the hole with them and help them out. We listen for that calm, still voice. And about the only time we can do that is in those moments of silent praise. But oftentimes that calm, still voice is telling us to reach the ends of the earth. I've been in that position a couple of times. I won't entirely go into detail here, but sitting at home, and Melinda knows this, sitting at home, I would be diving into something, whether I was in God's Word at the time or not, and it's just, He says go. I'm like, okay, where am I going? And usually, the two big times that's happened, he's very quickly put someone right in front of me or put a situation right in front of me. But the one was someone who I had knew from my past, who had really fallen into poverty and hard times and terrible things, and it go and got them out of the situation they were in and took them about 100 miles away to a safer place to be with family. And the other was somebody I had no idea, never met before in my life, ran up to the truck, can you help me? But both of those times, this psalm is kind of speaking to me in that way. The ends of the earth don't have to necessarily be the physical far reaches, remote areas. Sometimes the ends of the earth are right there in your own community. The ones that no one else can reach, the ones who are looking for hope, who are for crying out for hope. And sometimes in those moments of silent praise, God comes to you and not makes you. He gives you the choice, but draws you, compels you to be that hope that the ends of the earth are calling for. You are the trust and hope of all the ends of the earth and all the sea. Sorry, I'm reading chat for a second. Who creates the mountains by his strength, being clothed with power, who stills the roaring seas, the roaring of the waves, and the tumult of the peoples. This verse I was hoping we'd get back to when I first read it. If you've never been there, you may not fully understand the power of the sea. Even bodies of water that aren't quite the sea. The power of water is something that mankind has attempted to rein in on and harness many times. But as you've seen, especially last year in Appalachia and in the southeast and through some of the south, the terrible flooding that was happening. And some of our friends in Texas, just I think a couple months ago, there was some terror that when that river suddenly rose like 30 feet out of its banks. It was crazy, but we've never been able to stop water. Water is the extreme power of it. When you think about the seas, you think some of the ships we have are literally floating cities. Whether it's military and our aircraft carriers or it's pleasure, it's our cruise line ships, massive floating cities. But when the water moves, it moves that whole city. There's very little our largest boats can do to stop the power of the waves, of the water. They more get designed to deal with it, but they can't stop it. The power of the seas, the roaring. If you've been around that much water, whether it's a river 30 feet out of its banks or it's out in the middle of the ocean, all those molecules of water banging together, it's a loud noise. It's a whole lot of power. The roaring of the seas and the roaring of the waves. We talk about the power of that. I believe, and actually we're in hurricane season right now, right? So the Atlantic Ocean is producing several hurricanes, and I don't think any have really hit hard, at least in the U.S. yet this year. But even out to sea, NASA studies, a lot of these things, and I believe, if I'm not, I could be wrong, but I'm not far off. NASA studying these storms has said that the energy of the storms in the sea in a hurricane, the energy that is given off is equal to about 1,000 atomic bombs per day. So massive, massive power in the ocean, in the seas. And I think what I'm getting at here is in that we can do nothing. We are helpless. We can't stop the sea. We can't quiet the sea. But God, our God, God of the universe, can just say, be still. And all of that power dissipates. An awesome display of his power, his ability, is something that we can't even fathom. The energy of 1,000 atomic bombs in one day. And he can simply, nah, not today. Be calm, be still. He stills the roaring of the sea and the roaring of the waves and the tumult of the peoples. You know, this is an interesting thing for this day right here and now. Tumult literally means uproar, a mob, a riot. Just like we are powerless against the sea, everything man has ever built just gets pushed around by the sea. Is very difficult to have any power and control over a mob of people, an uproar of people. You're equally as powerless on a boat in the middle of the sea as you are in a sea of uproaring, screaming, yelling, angry, mob mentality humans. And we know there's a lot of that going on in our country right now. And we see there's no real control in it. I'm not saying that it's something I'm not taking sides on, because there is, I see a lot of, I think I've mentioned before, when we're on the news and this and that, you see a lot of both sides saying, what would Jesus do? And, well, I don't think, and many people using that to try to prove that it's their own self-righteous indignation, saying, you know, Jesus would take our side. And every side is saying Jesus would take our side. And kind of sitting back like, no, I don't think he would. There's a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, but I don't think he would fully be all in on any of you. No, what God would do, what God can do is what man can't do, and God can calm this. God can quell this. He can dissipate this and draw people together and to look at this in love and sacrificial love. And just like the ocean doesn't want to calm down. The people may not want to calm down. It's not that they have to want it to calm down. It's that we as a people, if we come together and seek God and glorify God and seek an answer to quell and dissipate the tumult of the peoples. Not to say to send everybody on their merry way, but to quell it to where people could come together and work things out. He has the power to do that. He has the power to do that where mankind is powerless. So they who dwell in the ends of the earth stand in awe of your signs and the evidence of your presence. There again we have all encompassing, the ends of the earth, both the physical and the realistic, the ones around us. The ends of the earth stand in awe of your signs. And I think somebody said earlier something about, I don't think I'm going to make it back to you. One of you mentioned earlier, I think being in awe about his works, and that kind of ties into that silence, that silent praise, just realizing God is in this, whatever it is you're focused on. Whether it's creation, whether it's the mountains and the roaring waters, or looking out in the stars and the universe, or seeing what God has done in someone's life. God's got. We talk about signs and wonders. Signs and wonders are really, as the amplified brackets here, the evidence of his presence. The evidence of his presence can be this huge mountain range in front of you, the birth of a child, or the calling of your friends, Bradley and Katie being called into ministry. The ends of the earth, to the ends of the earth, everyone who sees, who knows, who recognizes God, whether it's in creation or situation. The first response, when we know God, when we seek God, the first response is that submissive awe. And knowing good things are happening. They who dwell at the ends of the earth stand in awe of your signs, the evidence of your presence. You make the dawn and the sunset shout for joy. You visit the earth and make it overflow with water. That's where we start getting into the fields and the harvest. And I'm way past 9 o'clock, ain't I? But one thing here I noticed when David goes into talking about the fields and working the fields, and he mentions the furrows and the rivers, or the furrows and the ridges, and the bounty, the pastures, the flocks, the grain. One thing David never mentions is our physical work. I guess that kind of goes, that kind of ties right into what we were talking about in the beginning, with the work we do, not being a burden, but being in love, being in sacrifice, being something that we should long for and enjoy and want to do. Because it is whether it's plowing the field, What's he say here? Whether it's plowing the field, whether it's tending the sheep, whether it's harvesting the grain. It's God working through all of us, and God is doing so much more than we can possibly do. It might be my job to plow the field. But I plow the field, and there's really only one season to plow, and then I either go do my thing or I go rest. I've done my bit of work for God, but there's so much more that needs done there, and God does most of it. God's work is the bulk of the work. He brings the rain. It says you water its furrows abundantly. You smooth its ridges. You soften it with showers. You bless its growth. David never mentions the work of man when he's talking about the fields, from the moment of plowing to clear through to the abundance of grain. Because what we do for him is him working through us. But him working through us is only a small piece of the puzzle, part of the picture. The real work, the entirety of the work, the completeness of the work. Whether it's in one person's heart, whether it's in your home or your church. The work that you're doing, the bit that you're seeing, the hope that you have, and a promise of restoration, or the promise of growth and harvest. You can have some joy and almost a little pride in what God is asking you to do and what you do for that. But we recognize that when God is moving, what he's asking us to do is very little. So much of that work on the hearts, on the home, on the church, so much of that work is stuff that we can't do, we can hardly even comprehend. Bringing the water, softening the ground, blessing the harvest. Bringing the dew. I think I am well past time now. Hey Salvador, glad you could join us this morning, brother. Salvador Elsan joins us from Germany. Just good afternoon, many thanks. I'm glad you could jump in, and if you're still here or not, I hope you go back and join us on the replay. And you're always welcome to add some comments there. I do have it set up where the chat replays during if you rewatch the video, but sometimes it takes YouTube a bit to process that. Sometimes it's 12 to 24, even 36 hours later before they completely process the chat, but they eventually do. So that's about it for the week. This being Thursday, we won't have a study Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll be back Monday. I'm not going to flip through and look at what we're reading yet. We'll have to see how that goes. But again, I'm going to spend the day working on the trailer. I just took my glasses off. I'm going to spend the day working on the trailer. Tomorrow afternoon is going to be all about the fall fun festival for the kids. I think Saturday I'm going to be doing some things around here to prepare the homestead for wintertime. As Wintertime is giving us a peek these last couple of days. Yesterday was the first time since February or March of earlier this year that we had a wind chill. So wintertime is coming. I kind of feel I'm not quite ready for it, but I think we'll be able to handle it. But I hope you all had a wonderful and blessed weekend. Take this Psalm 65, read it again, really dwell on it. Take it from every aspect, When you see the farmers harvesting the grains, when you hear the stories about the ends of the earth, or when you recognize that sometimes the ends of the earth is that unreachable person that God may be asking you to reach. Don't necessarily hold on to me or anything I said today, but hold on to this word, the Psalm 65. Read it a few times if you can. Dwell on it. Really embed it in your heart. But I thank you all for being here today. Richie and Melinda and Miss Bliss and Salvador and Bradley and anyone else who joined. I don't think there was anyone else, was there? Nope. It's been a wonderful and blessed, spiritually nourishing fellowship. As Bradley is saying, go do Jesus things. Go do Jesus things, and when in doubt, love. I love you all. I truly do. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And God willing, I'll see you Monday morning. Except for you, Bradley. I better be seeing you tomorrow afternoon. I'll drop the camera and leave the chat run for a few minutes as I normally do, but otherwise, yeah. I'm unplugging, so we will see you Monday.